In the shadow of the still smoldering ruins of the World Trade Center, Reverend Daniel Paul Matthews and other leaders of the historic Trinity Church Wall Street headed back to work. The Episcopal parish is one of the oldest in the U.S., more than 300 years old. The current church building, a few blocks away from the Trade Center, was consecrated in 1846. And despite the devastation of the neighborhood, Trinity still stands.
The bells are ringing. That is unbelievable.
8 days after the terrorist attacks, the church was allowed to reopen its doors. The interior suffered little damage, but the centuries-old cemetery was buried by debris. FBI and recovery officials sifted through the mess before church officials were allowed back. Matthews says Trinity, like the entire nation, is now trying to recover and move forward.
We look at this tall spire, which was for decades the tallest building in all of America, and that symbol still represents the strength, the commitment, and the deep spiritual quality of our nation.
500 feet from ground zero, St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church was totally destroyed. No one died there, but the Archdiocese lost more than 100 parish members at the Trade Center. Rescue workers managed to salvage a few pieces of the church.
And one can see here a mixture of dust and some burning.
But church officials have not yet been able to recover their holy relics of 3 saints. The Archdiocese has launched a relief effort to rebuild St. Nicholas and to provide other assistance. Archbishop Demetrios gathered clergy from New York and New Jersey to discuss ways to minister to their grieving congregations. Ministry is also continuing at the Pentagon. The Salvation Army and numerous other religious groups are providing on-the-scene counseling for recovery workers who've been digging through the wreckage for more than a week.
We'll say things to them, "You're really hurting, aren't you?" Which gives them the opportunity to say, "Yeah, I am. It's really an emotional trauma that I'm experiencing there." And it's amazing how much something like this has opened the spiritual possibilities to many of them.
I pray that you would encourage us to continue.
Around the nation, people across the spectrum have been seeking solace in the spiritual. Roman Catholic Bishop Kenneth Angel of Vermont lost his brother and sister-in-law.
Yes, the terrorists should be brought to justice, but we must respond in a Christ-like manner by striving to forgive even our persecutors, even the perpetrators of this infamous day of evil in America.
Religious services have been packed and overflowing with people coming to pray and to seek answers.
Your God is not passive. Your God is not indifferent, and your God is not weak.
At a time like this, stuff and things and money and power means next to nothing. We know that, and so we say, well, what does mean something? What is everlasting? What is the truth behind being a person? And those questions are spiritual questions.
You either become some person that loses anything in terms of hope, or you turn to the reality of God.
Across, please.
American Jews marked their New Year, 5762, amid heightened security at many synagogues. Rosh Hashanah services, always well attended, were even more crowded this year. The traditional liturgy, the psalms and the prayers, took on a special relevance.
This is a time for renewal. The old year is ending with horror. Let us make sure that the new year will be a safe and a secure year for all of our country and for the entire civilized world.
Jews are now in a period of traditional introspection about their sins over the past year. The period ends on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Some say current events have brought new personal issues to the surface.
To be able to look into myself and say, I know you are angry. I know you have hatred, but you have to learn to cleanse. You have to learn that we must move on from here.
For Muslim Americans, it was also a week of wide-ranging emotions. President Bush granted a long, hoped-for meeting with national Muslim leaders. It took place at the Washington Islamic Center.
The face of terror is not the true faith. of Islam. That's not what Islam is all about. Islam is peace. These terrorists don't represent peace. They represent evil and war.
The president also condemned hate crimes against Arab and Muslim Americans.
But that's not the America I know. That's not the America I value.
Good afternoon, Care.
Many Muslim groups have been working around the clock, providing support to their members and meeting with U.S. officials to aid in the terrorist investigation and to express concerns about a backlash against their community. The Council on American Islamic Relations usually receives about 600 reports of anti-Muslim discrimination and harassment in a year. In the week after the attacks, they logged more than 400 reports.
Like, I got one call, and it wasn't anything really tough, but it was just the talking with the woman and the way she sounded and how frightened she sounded made me sad, you know.
Mosques across the country have been vandalized. A car drove into the largest mosque in Ohio. At least 2 murders have been called hate crimes, including the shooting death of a Sikh man in Arizona who apparently was mistaken for a Muslim because of his turban. But there have also been signs of unity. Many non-Muslims have rallied in support of their Muslim neighbors. A local Muslim leader received a standing ovation at California's Crystal Cathedral. Religious groups are also wrestling with the appropriate U.S. response, how justice can best be achieved. The religious peace movement is gearing up against any military campaign of retaliation.
Tuesday was a terrible day. No one could spend that day watching the images and not be so profoundly shaken and hurt by it. But it is not the role of national policy to act out of that emotional context.
The American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker agency, has launched a new campaign called No More Victims.
Use the law enforcement model, use the UN, use a tribunal model to catch people who are genuinely capable of the kind of terror that was executed last Tuesday. But keep away from the notion that you're turning the whole nation to a basis of war.
But many other religious leaders do see room for military force.
My faith is not committed to pacifism. That is to say, I believe that I must resist evil, if necessary, with power, that I have the right to destroy those who come to destroy me.
More than 1,000 clergy have signed a statement calling for sober restraint in the U.S. response and urging against an indiscriminate retaliation that would bring even more loss of innocent life. Meanwhile, a new Reuters Zogby poll found that an overwhelming majority, 75% of Americans, support an all-out war against countries that harbor terrorists. I'm Kim Lawton reporting.